네, 지금 오후 1시가 되었고요.
So the time now is 1 p.m. We are holding the conference on cultural diversity in Asia and beyond. We are about to begin and resume the session 1. We are holding the conference in Chung-Ang University Seoul campus. I see that so many people are joining us for the conference, and today's conference is aired via YouTube as well. We provide you with the simultaneous interpretation service in Korean and English. For those of you who would like to listen to Korean, either English version of the conference, please make sure that you press the button below.
Please be sure that you turn on the interpretation button on the bottom right on your Zoom window. So please click the interpretation button and be sure that you are listening the English version. 네, 그러면 지금 세션 1을 시작하도록 하겠습니다.
So let's officially begin the session 1. The moderator of session 1 is Professor Sun-Kyu Kim of the Department of Philosophy at Chung-Ang University. Let me turn my microphone to Professor Sun-Kyu Kim. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Kim Sun-Kyu. As introduced, I am working for the Da Vinci Liberal Department from Chung-Ang University. In the morning, in the keynote session, you talked about the cultural diversity in a comprehensive manner. But in the first session, we're going to talk about the conflict and integration of the cultural diversity. First presenter today is Kim Dohye, professor from Duksung Women's University. So we have about 1.5 hours for this session. I will give you about 30 minutes for presentation for each presenter, after which we will have about 30 minutes for Q&A sessions and panel discussions. I will hand over my mic to Professor Kim Dohye.
My name is Dohye Kim, just introduced. Please allow me to share my screen. I thought that I'm given 20 minutes for presentation before. If my presentation gets longer, I think there are people who might doze off. My name is Dohye Kim. About 2 years ago, I've been conducting research on migrant students in Korea, and my presentation today is on one of the researches I conducted, which are not released yet. The reason why I conducted this research is that I found that migrant students, especially from Asian countries, I wanted to see the experiences that they have outside the university in the labor market and what are strategies that they use and implement in order to negotiate their status outside the university. As you know, the number of students from abroad drastically increased. So there are over 150,000, about 70% up compared to 2011. In 2016, the number of students exceeded 100,000. Since then, there are 150,000 students coming in every year. So that includes student graduates and undergraduates and postgraduates. After COVID-19, the number of students coming from abroad decreased in 2 consecutive years, down by 4.9%, which is not significant. And by nationality, I'm sure you know, China accounts for the biggest portion, followed by Vietnam, Mongolia. So all of them are Asian countries. And one interesting thing that we need to pay attention to is that although it is not included in our research, the number of our Chinese students is decreasing, and that is replaced by students from Central Asia. And of course, that is not included in our research this time. Students from China, many say and study in Seoul, but those who from Central Asian countries, they study in universities in other local areas. And already there's many research done on the increasing number of students from abroad. And I think those researches point out a reason as a quite common element behind the increasing number of students. As a foreign student are not included in the quota of the student, so they are contributing to recovering financial difficulties. That's why local universities have many systems to encourage and to attract students from abroad. At the same time, compared to university in Singapore, Hong Kong, and other Western universities, the tuition fee in Korea is cheaper than those in other countries. So I think those migrant students from abroad want to study in Korea, meaning that they can get hold of the degree in other countries, and also they can learn Korean language so that they can have a better jobs. I think that also includes the passion of the students from abroad, especially other Asian countries. That is the common reason pointed out by research. As I said earlier, those migrant students hold quite interesting social status in Korea. They are students and potential social supremacy. That is one considerable element, and also there's expectation for them. So compared to other migrant workers or refugees and marriage migrant, it is highly likely that the Korean people treat them better than others. But still, nonetheless, depends on the race and also ethnicity and also the origin country. They are not completely free from discriminatory treatment. So outside the university and campus in labor market, they come across with various people, and I want you to see what kind of discrimination, what kind of treatment they receive, and what strategies they implement in order to be away from it. And also that tells us that how the Korean society discriminates them in a multifaceted aspect. And at the same time, one another purpose of my research is that we had a prejudice against students from abroad, just treating them as a student, treating them as a beneficiary of our system, because they do have various goals and purposes, and also they are a member of our society, earning income in our society. So I wanted to draw a new picture out of it. So this research was conducted between 2018 and 2020. I conducted the interview on 18 people, mainly those from 전라남도 and 경상북도, both undergraduates and postgraduates, Vietnam and Mongolia. The students from those two countries, the majority of my interviewees, plus 2 out of 5 graduate students received a scholarship from the point they enter, and the rest had to pay the tuition fee by themselves. And to help you better understand about this issue, I interviewed them, and I better explain to you how they enter into the labor market. We need to know what kind of work and what kind of job that they find out, so that we can better understand about what their life is in Korea. And no matter what the reason is, I found that they entered the labor market through quite similar path. Most of the university students, they enter the Korea as a language student, meaning that they are not very good at Korea. Korean when they first entered Korea. So that means they had to depend on ethnic community to find out part-time job. So that was the commonality that I found. And of course, there are our friends who are from the same country. However, still, they are not very good at Korean. So in the case of Mongolia, Vietnam, ethnic communities centered around migrant workers and marriage migrants quite strong. So they introduced those students to part-time jobs. That's how they got into labor market. For example, the student from Mongolia who are in the 20s, he and she FaceTimed a cousin in Ulsan and found a job in a factory in Ulsan. The cousin lived in Korea as a migrant worker for more than 15 to 20 years. So just like this case. So with the help of a pan-ethnic community, they entered labor market, meaning that they are likely to find a job as low-skilled workers. But since they are a student, there are other uniqueness. They need time to study. They need to take the class. Even the class takes place online, they preferred job that they can adjust work time if it is possible. Because when they work in the factory, it means that they have to be there from 9 to 6. So they prefer the seasonal jobs so that they can flexibly adjust the work time. And cleaning motels, because that means they work during the nighttime, and serving, and also quick delivery, which gives them more freedom to spend their time as they wish. So these are the jobs that they preferred in Korea. And the labor market as well, by gender, by the level of Korean fluency, everything was quite classified in more detail. So in the initial stage of interest into Korea, they depended on the ethnic community, but as they are more fluent to Korean, they used app, for example, Albamon. So this was one of the way to access the labor market. Of course, this could be varied from region to region, but for example, Gyeongsang-bukdo, that is the reason with many universities concentrated, meaning that the immigrant students came to that region in a short period of time, meaning that there are no jobs left for them. So in that case, by group, they even had to go to different region for a part-time job. By country, male students from Mongolia took a part-time job, for example, for the company that helps people move their house. And this is what actually they said to me without saying a word. Because the Korean people will not be able to tell whether we are from Mongolia or we are Korean. So during the work, the employee of that company does not allow us to pick up the phone. So the male student from the Mongolia can do the job which contact and which touches the property of Korean people. So racial prejudice from the Korean people opens up a specific type of labor market for foreign students. And from now on,
then let's look at the discriminations that the foreign students are experiencing in Korea. For many interviewees, they have shared with us about various experiences they had in Korea. But in common, they said Koreans discriminate them against their mother country and the level of economy of their mother countries. So those from Bangladesh and others, it is well described by those students coming from Bangladesh. And here, the interviewee, he got a full ride, and also very taking a huge pride because he is coming from a middle income family household in Bangladesh. And one day he was driving his own car in Korea, and one of the professors said that can you even maintain this car, this vehicle in Korea? He shared that experience. That means the intonation, the expression of the Korean professor, it means like it's absurd that you can make this vehicle here in Korea, thinking about your mother country. So as you can see in the slide, in this descriptions, the foreign country students, that means it is likely for them to enjoy at least middle income level of wealthness in their mother country, but Koreans try to determine the level of those foreign country students depending on their mother country as it is. The similar stories have been shared with us from many students, many interviewees, and so it is not only the discrimination outside the campus, but also inside of the campus. For example, their peers or their Korean professors, they try to be more, they try to be nicer to the students from Western countries, and they try to be mentor for them, but they're less likely to be the mentor for the foreign students like me. And they also have very outrageous experiences in the campus, but that occasion is less likely compared to what they have been experiencing outside of the campus. So this bare race based discrimination, they have less likability to experience that inside the campus. And it is sad, but in Korea, in the campus, those foreign students don't have much opportunity to share or to have interactions with Korean students. That's why they don't have much opportunity to have that discrimination within the campus. And like I said, for those interviewees, they are doing the part-time jobs and they are experiencing the labor markets. So I happen to be exposed to that discrimination in the job market. For example, this is a narrative from a Mongolian student Coco. She had master degree and doctorate degree in Korea, staying in Korea for about 10 years. Staying here in 10 years, she was involved in many different part-time jobs, agricultural work to interpretation and translation. So have been exposed to many different job areas. While having interview with her, she said once they noticed I am from Mongolia, they said, "Are you coming here for money?" And I said, "I'm a student." Then they say, "Oh, you're a student." They try to be more nicer than. So it is ironical and very ridiculous because Koreans try to discriminate us against the purpose of our visit. If I'm a student, then they be nice to us. If I'm a diplomat, they try to respect me more. If I'm just a worker, they try to not respect me that much. So if I go to a hospital, they want us to show our identification, then I intendedly show my identification card showing that my status is D2, that means foreign student, then I'll be less discriminated because of my purpose of the visit. So Coco said, Korea, there's lots of discrimination in various levels, and also discrimination against workers is harsher than other kind of discrimination. But interestingly, this is something all the foreign students are knowing and well aware of. So for those non-Western or non-English speaking countries people, their way of meeting Korea and English speaking country people's way of meeting Korea are far different from one another. That's why many Korean people they are concerning because we have negative perceptions from the perspective of the foreign students when it comes to they meet Korea and get the experience and get the discrimination. Because in the past, Korean try to be nice for the students, but right now, even for the students, Koreans have negative perceptions and try to say, even if you are a student, you still came here for money. So because many foreign students first coming to Korea to learn something, but that is a deception. They just go to find job, and this is another frame that people try to put foreign students in. This is situation where we are being robbed of one way to be treated without discrimination because we're students. Still, students are discriminated harshly because of this kind of frame. Then let me talk about the negotiation of the identity for foreign students. So these people, they describe their memory about the discrimination and violence they have experienced. They not only express their desperation or frustration, but they try to have it as a learning lessons so that they can be better. So they try to reaffirm their identity to students because they're students, but it's a momentary thing. They ultimately will go to the job market that they have to have an identity as a worker. So they try to just experience about the discrimination they might have to experience later on. So one Mongolian student, he has a part-time job by riding a train or bus about 2 hours to have a part-time job. By doing so, he say he learned patience and the endurance that he need to build. This kind of foreign students who is in their early 20s, because they are young, so they said this experience made them learn about their level of and sense of independence and sense of um, learning and standing on their own. And other is a negotiation about their identity. He was working for a motel in Korea. By working 2 weeks, he was kicked out, but he was not paid well. So per day, they have about 40,000 won pay. But they couldn't get it. So he came back to motel to get his payment. But the owner of the motel, he did denied to pay that, but he had to get it no matter what because this is really precious money. So he had to beg him and say, I'm a student, this is the necessary money for me to live in Korea. That then he was able to get the money. But many people, when they were interviewing, they were finishing their student period, they were working in Korea as a migrant workers. For some people, they try to hide their appearances intentionally. And this is a narrative from a Mongolian student, Empuya. She was a PhD student. She was an elite in Mongolia as a teacher, but coming into Korea during the vacation. She was working at a fish market restaurant, and Korean clients and customers there, they tried to do the sexual harassment to her, saying, "Do you have time? Do you want to play with me?" She was very she was very embarrassed by that experience, and she tried to hide her identity as a student. And also, other colleagues or peers in that restaurant working together, the Mongolian people, she also told those people not to expose my identity to other people. This is intentional hiding. By doing so, they intentionally not to expose. By doing so, they try to keep their dignity. And also, they try to keep their real self from their situation where they have to work. So, like this, so those student migrants, they were perceived as the more than a middle income family members to regenerate their classes by earning some capitals in the global culture. So they try to go and leap forward to the high class from middle class. That was the perception in the past, but in some of the emerging foreign study target countries, just like Korea, they are understood as a person who can do the low level and low skilled market workers. So in this study, I believe the Korean society, we have discrimination against students, migrants, and the worker migrants, but that discrimination level itself is really different. By doing so, we also can see the students, migrants, they also try to protect themselves by employing different level of techniques. And Toya, she also came here with his husband. By doing so, she can protect herself from that discrimination. But this dual identity, those students have to adopt. We have to accept that, and also only when we eradicate discrimination to them, then we can solve this problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kim Do-hye, for your presentation. So just like the keynote session, I think I thought that it'd be better off to do the Q&A all together, but since there are questions received, I would like to ask you questions that we received first, which is very long. And then maybe if we have time, we can spare some more time for Q&A. The first question is not only Korean students, but professors who are teaching the students from other countries. I think the professors and teachers even have a prejudice against students. It depends on where they are from. So in order to increase acceptance of cultural diversity among professors and teachers, do you think we have policy measures to do that? So will you be able to answer that question right away? To my understanding, I think there are universities which are trying that, especially the university with a high number of foreign students. I think they often hold and conduct workshop for teachers and professors. But as far as I know, the Ministry of Education or the National, the Korean Language Center, we do not have a massive scale education program hosted by the two organizations, because the government and the university considers the foreign students as a target to manage. So I think at the moment we have limitations. So I think this is definitely room for improvement. So the first session in this afternoon is about examples in detail. I'm sure there are many different opinions about the same example. So I would like to kindly ask all of you to ask questions directly related to presentation material.
So the second question is the Western culture, the white-oriented culture, or the imperialism were called war era frame. Maybe our culture and discrimination, we have our commonality and difference. When we try not to think about Korea itself, maybe we can think about the situation not that different from those people, not only when they study in Korea, but also in other Western countries. So those Asian students studying abroad, what do you think of their situation and the discrimination they have to face when they study abroad? That is a very critical and important question. And this is something that I really ponder right now. I'm not sure whether my answer will satisfy your question. So when I think about this, so in Western countries, So Korean students experience when they study abroad in Western countries, maybe their experience might be different when they were students and when they are working really in Western countries. But this is something that I have to think a little further. But during they while they're studying, whether they can work at the same time in the Western country, that's really less likely and they have really slim chance. But compared to that, the Asian students, when they studying abroad in Korea while working here as part-time job, they have more opportunities. And there's some gray areas or outside of the law enforcement boundary, they can deceptively work. And also the nature of their work as a part-time job is also different from how we can have a job as a foreign student in the Western country when we try to get a job. And we have wide spectrums and also extensive scope for the Asian students to study and work in Korea. But that is really good point. To better pinpoint on your question, maybe I have to recategorize what I studied. I think that is a really good suggestion for our approach to think about my research further. Yes. I will also give you a Q&A session in which you can also cast some other questions. Maybe professor, you also can have some time to reponder your idea and re-summarize what you think. That'll be really good. Then let us move on to our second presentation.
The second speaker is a professor of Chung-Ang University, and her name is Na-young Lee. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lee Na-young, professor of sociology at Chung-Ang University. Can you hear me well? Yes, we can hear you well. So I majored in research about women in master's course and PhD, and my degree is English literature, meaning that I have different experiences doing study for my degree and also master's and also PhD course. Just like professors before me, maybe my topic on my presentation will be broad, and I would like to ask for your kind understanding. And the questions that I have, I would like to share with you. And also, sorry that I did not give it to you, the report. And the key topic is the same, but the details inside could be slightly different to the version that I submitted to you. As the time span behind my research is 40 to 50 years, and so I gave a lot of thoughts on the title of my research. There are many backlashes, and there are sayings that it is because of progressive and feminist movement. So that's why I made the title of research like this. So it could be considered a hail and or waves. Of course, it could be different from researcher to researcher. It's indeed in a second wave, and also second wave is composed of the first, the second, and third phase, according to Nancy Fraser. And there are people who are saying that there's a fourth movement, including the movement taking place online. Then what about Korea? There's no common ground found among experts, and there's no discussion about that. Personally, I think the third wave has arrived upon us, so I think it could be also interpreted as a second wave. As many people recognize it, I think feminism is really tangible, is realized in our reality. So in the past, according to our theory, there's the philosophical name like feminism, but the word feminism was actively used embarking a group of activities, and because of the femicide incident in Gangnam station. So what they insist and what they propose among those who led the movement, people wanted to ask what they want, and it is called misogyny. That means hatred for women, and that was even taken to whether you like women or not. If there is a femicide, there then should be a male side, but that is not the word that we use in our theory. But these two concepts are colliding and conflicting with each other, and men and women are conflicting with each other, and that is about when the conflict over gender issues started to appear in Korean society. In the past, the men from the conservative group even considered women are minorities in the Korean society. That's how they perceived a woman. But from that time, that incident, men and women were framed by the media that they are conflicting with each other. And also, there was a media news report released about men who are up against the feminism. And also, we witnessed a trend that we call backlash, which started to appear in many types and forms. And if that was any problem of so-called ilbe, but even that was developed into a bigger issue. In the last presidential election, among the questions sent out to presidential candidate, even that include a question like, are you feminist and what promises can you make for women? And most of the questions by the now the feminist women are you going to abolish the Ministry of Women and Family Affairs? Meaning that we reached a very complicated situation around this issue. Of course, I won't be able to answer all the questions that I just raised. But I think this is a very important issue that we need to talk about. So I think I'm going to just share with you ideas around it and history around of women's movement or feminist movement before 2000s in Korea. What's the trend after that time, and what's the trend around a backlash? These are the points that I'm going to share with you. As you know, when we talk about the history of a progressive women's movement, that I think starts from the when Korea was under the rule of Japan. And during the democratization movement in the 1980s, we started to organize women's movement or feminist movement against the dictatorship. I think the activists who are participating in the democratic movement were colliding with each other. I think conflict back then was not all about a bad thing. There are people who consider part of the movement as a women's movement or feminist movement. That was when people started to say that we need to independently set up organization for feminist movement. Back then, we started to appear the establishment of the group of feminist movement nationwide. What's interesting is that in Western countries, in the late 1960s was when this movement was properly established. I think this could be difference or commonality between East and West. Among the Western feminists, most of them were from the activists who opted for progressive movement, those who called for the free of black slavery, and also those who participated in anti-imperialism. In addition, capitalism as well, new left-wing parties started to appear, and they started to criticize the downside of capitalism. So during the time, that was a time when we started to establish the feminist movement. Of course, it has not been easy. And the third world and progressive feminism, and also developing countries, the feminism, all different kinds of movement and theory were introduced to Korea. And that was when experts started to selectively choose different concepts, which was in line of the establishment of feminist groups. And that greatly helped raising awareness of the general public on gender violence and domestic violence. And also that was when we established the Korean Women's Corps and also Korean Women's Workers Association, and also Sexual Violence Relief Center. Since then, we started to enact a series of different acts. And it was thanks to global feminism. That was when we saw the growth of a feminist movement in the international community. For example, sexual slavery by Japanese soldiers. But still, back then people perceived the men are the center of our humanity. And unprecedentedly, we achieved improvement in laws which took Western countries about 200 years. But back then, we only took not many years to improve, a huge improvement in our laws. That's when we achieved great improvement back in the 1980s to 1990s. So feminist movement before that time was related to anti-imperialism, anti-capitalism movement. And as a progressive administration took office, that was when we call administration friendly to women took office. And among the activists for the last 10 years from that time, laid a political foundation, and we call it Democrats. And that does not really have negative connotation. And even in Western countries, this is very similar tendency, which was also witnessed in Western countries. So the state and also civil society started to cooperate with each other, unlike in the past. And of course, there was a heavy criticism about that. The people criticized that feminist movement was organized, and also there's a lack of radical criticism. And also the Ministry of Women and Family Affairs, which is a controversial issue nowadays, was first headed by Lee Geum-hee under the Nomuyon administration, and also the Act on the Prevention of the Prostitution was changed from the previous version of the act. And also there was a movement that we abolished the patriarchal family system. So that was a time when we achieved a lot of things that we wanted. And that was when the neoliberalism started to appear after Asian financial crisis in 1998. So under the neoliberalism, was not established based on the free capitalism. still back then we had a patriarchal family system, and also Juche ideology was there. So it was very ironic that we had to endure the two systems. So post the new era that swayed the Western countries back in 1990s was the example of that. So we were overwhelmed by that. Post theories overwhelmed the Korean society. So the recognition and implementation of sexuality started to appear. So there was double-edged sword related to neoliberalism. One is that while emphasizing capability of individuals, there was some great achievement accomplished by women. I think that was when the great change started to take place.
So in detail, the sexuality perception and practice has changed, but skipping the details, but I will put focus on this. So this prostitution, so those who sell their sex, that is prostitute. So this is act as a criticism against those prostitute. And also, in reality, they were the target of the penalty when they are caught, and they were the target of the stigma all the time. And it is really difficult to change. And it is not the problem of the individuals, it's not the problem of the desire, it's a problem of the structure that we have in Korea that is very progressive approach to deal with the situation. This is a third party relation, not just the prostitute and the buyer. We have the pimp in the middle. And the prostitute now is started to perceived as the victim. Do we have similar laws in place in other countries? If you ask me that, yes, other countries have that kind of progressive laws, but we couldn't take and adopt as it is, as the New Zealand or other countries are accepting it, because we were still very early stage to think about the rights of those prostitute. So we try to, but at least define and specify the responsibility of the government to identify and to prevent this prostitution or sexual harassment and social or sexual attack. By doing so, we try to systemize and build a framework to protect and rehabilitate the victims. By doing so, at the same time, the Special Act Against Sexual Crime was first established, and here we abolished the prohibition about the indictment of the family members when it comes to sexual crime. And to be exact, it was the Lee Myung-bak administration where we have the unanimous homicide, and there we call it frustration crime or gender violence. That kind of title was first came into being from the Lee Myung-bak generation, Lee Myung-bak administration. So how can we express our sexual identity and I myself as one gender? So up until now, a woman was subjectified by others and also passively enjoy what they can enjoy in the sexual arena. But from here, they try to have their self sexual identity. They try to start the discourse about the pornography for females and love motel or boutique motel. This kind of discourse has been expanded. But this was actually the starting part of the disturbance in the online to talk about the female self identity expression. On the one hand, we had the backlash started. We had that girl series or the women's series. We first had Alpha Girl, which is not bad in its definition, but we do not have alpha men. Those alpha girl, they are really great people have excellent achievement in their academic or leadership area. When they exceed those of man, they are called as alpha girl. But when it is reversely applied, we do not call those men as alpha man. Also called miss. When this terminology spreaded, we came that with the low birth rate issue. And we also have other series of stigmatizing women called so-called in Korean 된장녀 or 김치녀. And it was expanded and to be penetrated into main media outlets. So-called 된장녀 was calling a certain group of female people who have some vanity or some luxurious item pursuers. But for 김치녀, that is called those who are just only calling for their rights by ignoring their responsibilities and duties. Having those words, the megalia appeared. We have many articles that discuss megalia. Because of the megalia discussion, many people have negative perception of megalia. What they tried to do was mirroring. There were so many criticism or uh, or describing women ridiculously on the online, mainly described by men, they try to do it reversely. They do the same thing against males. So among these things on the horizon, we had Gangnam subway station homicide case, thereby the Korean karaoke. There was a toilet on the stair just outside of the karaoke. One university man, he killed a girl without knowing, just randomly, the girl because that was a female. Having this homicide case, what was surprising was the misogyny or hate crime against women. So many people try to honor that death because that was some symbol of the hate crime against women. They try to put some memos to honor the death of the female. So here we had the terminology misogyny and other hate crime against women kind of terminology. So this was specifically used by those female or feminism activists, but now it is basically used widely among the people. So on the online, Megalian movement was spreaded, but offline we are victimized by males. Then we have to do our movement not only online but also offline. That was the starting of the movement offline. So there we had many movement to abolish Soranet or Me Too acts or school Me Too movement or escaping corset or anti giving a birth or Hewayok demonstration movement. And this is not only for certain individuals, it was for the collective female to do the movement together. Here, those people who are leading this movement was those in 20s and female. Maybe you can think about their reverse gender that is male in 20s. Because when you think about this, when you see the ratio between male and female, we have a striking gap between their number of births between son and between male and female. Actually, these are the era when I got married and gave birth. But because we have less male, less female than male, so they were very anxious because when they were elementary students, they don't have their pairs as female. They have to pair with other male. And also they have their own oppression or control because they were the sole son out of all the females out there. And this sentiment is not something that we still fail to define in this generation, and that is very problematic. But since 2000s, we have neoliberalism order that shaped the culture and the order of Korea. We still have the perception to prefer male or son, but we don't have many female child. But at the same time, we have hyper low birth rate country now. So here we have to regenerate our family by giving a birth. So regardless of it's a son or daughter, we have to invest a lot to fulfill their achievements as academic background. That's why we have many husbands earning money, sending that to overseas to support their children studying there. So we have huge fantasy about the feminism, but still we are entrapped in this patriarchal society. And there we have neoliberalism, we have that ironical situation, and the victims are the those in 20s, and those 20s are frustrated. They give up everything from job and marriage and their chance to give a birth. And since they were born, they were equipped with computer and the devices and uh, how to control them. So those in 20s in Korea, they are digital native generation. Surprisingly and politically, what something that we have to recognize is that those who were in 20 and 2000s, they are in 30s right now. And for about 9 years of the conservative administration in Korea, there we had the Sewol Ferry incident. That was those era, and how the Sewol Ferry event had an impact on the sentiment. That is something that we have to look into further. So when we go back to the feminism, so we had achievement due to the activists of the feminism, but that achievement is not shown well. As you can see, the backlash has started earlier by adopting the terms like alpha girl or other misogynistic terms. So if even if we have the fantasy in which women can do anything if they have talents, but still the women had to face the glass ceiling or other discrimination the society are giving to them. So in the promotion and also child rearing and also their sole responsibility to raise a child, those are the barriers they have to meet. And also they have to be the target and victim against the obscene materials and pornography online. And this digital native feminists or females, they have to witness it no matter what. And they also have to be discriminated by the accumulated uh, discrimination that had been on the society without being disappeared. And here, due to such a situation, feminist campaigns or movements were up and coming and were in the mainstream, not for the individuals, but in the collective level. And this is commemorized as the biggest feminism activism and movement in Korea. And also we had Nth Room case. And since the Gangnam homicide, we had many situations and all the remnant issues and accumulated sexual discriminations and also new ways of discriminations. These are here. We work to eradicate all of them. And also culturally, we try to create female narrative and female contents. But what is interesting here is that compared to back in 1960s and 19 70s, when the radical feminism lead the way, that was disappeared and replaced by the cultural feminism. And those that once disappeared reappear these days again. And the theories that came into being in the United States back in 1960s and 70s, they were retranslated and republished in Korea these days. I believe this is the settlement of the newly developed female identity, which was expanded and rediscovered back in 2000, early 2000. And this is once connected and once disconnected. And here, what we need to think about is the backlash phenomena. And there was a survey and one article published in Shisain, one magazine. They had this survey and also published a series of articles related to this Edenam phenomenon and backlash. Back in 2020, the Women's Policy Institute made a survey on two questions. First question was that our society is unfair to female, while the other question is our society is unfair to male. And depending on their gender, their response was largely different. And also, not only that, but other things, women and male have different opinions. And there are many articles or books about backlash, and one of the most cited book is Sujan Paludi's Backlash. He said the uncertain majority who feels their rights and their power is shrinking because of the social changes or political changes. In such cases, they have sentimental reaction to it and have a backlash against such changes. This is not only gender part or racial or religious minority can also do the same to go against this discrimination. And Sujan Paludi had lots of research on this backlash. So this is not because we have an equality, it's because we have highly likely possibility to achieve equality. And those who have anxiety against such equality because they have enjoyed so much power before, they potentially explode their complaints against this. So when we think about the recent situation, I will think about the current situation. It was back in April 2021. The opposition party made a bill to abolish the extra point to give those who serve in the army or serve in the military. And back in July 2021, the abolition of the Ministry of the Gender Equality and Family that was raised by Congressman Lee from the opposition party. And also, there was an online attack against athlete Ansan, who achieved 3 medals in Tokyo Olympic. And these days, one of the nominee of the presidential election also said that he will abolish Ministry of Gender Equality and Family once he's elected. So, and also he said structural gender inequality is not in existence, which is strange opinion. But here, when we see the flow, this is coming from the community dominated by male that is spread it to media and political sphere and go back to media and political sphere and go back again to the community dominated by males. The what way do we have to see this? So, as Susan Paludi said, we have to think about the situation about those majority who are afraid of being robbed of their power or their rights. That's why we have social divide between genders, and that is used by the political spheres to get the right or get the political powers. And we try to victimize one other to get more power. So this is the witch hunting that was done in the Middle Age, which is repeated here by the backlash against feminism or females. So those who are not succumbing to the male and they're just only enjoying their rights, not doing their duties or responsibility. And also, women are passively recognized as the person who have to accept the desire release of male. And as an um, as a argument against this as the opposition to opposing the idea of the sexual harassment and anti-sexual harassment, then they do not accept it, and they also are jealous of women who have talents and exceeding the capability of male. So as a conclusion, I cast many different questions about the trends and mainstream or the discourse that we need to think about. I just cast some question to you to think about these issues, not to have solutions. For the common good, we had the long-held fight as a humankind. We have enjoyed the result and the achievement by those combats and the fight that we have done so far. Those in the hardships or those in the really difficult situation, they tried to change the world and they succeeded. So the result is enjoyed by us. Right now, what we need to do, we have to minimize the hate, the collective hate against one part of the society. We talked about diversity, but what is hidden inside is the strong power and hierarchy and the discrimination against by those systems. And this is something that the vested right generations or groups have to solve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, for your presentation. You gave a very good opportunity for us to understand about the feminist movement in general. We just attended the two presentations, and we have Kang Myung-ju, a professor from Chung-Ang University. My name is Kang Myung-ju, discussant for this session. And as Professor Kim Sun-Kyu said, my research topic is bordering theory, bordering culture. There are conflicts and borders between different cultures, and I was interested in how to overcome the differences and conflicts between different cultures. And after attending the two presentations, I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I think it was a very good opportunity for me to gain insight from you, as I do not have abundant experiences. I have several questions, and maybe my experience in this sector might not be long, so please correct me if I do not understand your research correctly. My question is directed to Professor Kim Dohye. You conducted research on discriminatory treatment experienced by foreign students in our labor market and how they use what strategies in order to be away from the situation. And you gave us actual examples, and I think it was the research methodology, I think, was very appropriate to understand about that. And the students who were target of your research said that they are from Gyeongsang-do and also Jeollanam-do, not Seoul and Gyeonggi. So I think those are two reasons are conservative and very much enclosed. And may I ask why you picked those two reasons as the background of your research? As you were explaining about examples, about the difficulties that they shared, I also felt empathy and sympathy, and definitely we need to make a structural improvement, and especially discrimination based on the origin of a country. I shared with your opinion and about the difficulties in labor market they received, and they were subject to discrimination because they were considered a migrant workers, and also I felt that it was unjust experience that they had to endure because they do not have much experiences in the job, and also maybe the experience that they suffer is that they do have a kind of their elite from the country that they are from. Among the examples that you gave us, when I looked at the language fluency, you said that the level of Korean that they meet in the labor market are different. I think the perceiving that itself is discriminatory thought against the Korean people, because they, I think, reflected that they are from elite class from where they are. And I would like to know what you think of my opinions on that. Lastly, this is just out of curiosity. And some of the foreign students become unregistered migrant workers. I found it ironical. If they fail to register themselves here as a student, then I think they should go back to their country naturally. And why would they become unregistered migrant workers in Korea, do you think? Professor Kim, yes. Thank you for raising several questions, especially about the first question. I've been meeting with the students from local universities. Well, before I came to Doksung University, I taught students in local university. That is one of the main reasons why. And I think there's a very distinctive characteristics in local universities. As I mentioned earlier, the number of Chinese students is not large compared to other regions in Korea. There's a high number of students from Central Asian countries, for example, Mongolia and Vietnam. And there are many research conducted on why, and common reason behind is, as I said earlier, local universities do have a very good scholarship system, giving foreign students financial incentives. So because of that financial merit, not only that, local universities also do have a strength in the sense that foreign students can easily find a part-time job around that region. So the fact that they can find a part-time job is one of the main reasons behind why foreign students come to local universities. And plus, compared to universities in Seoul, living expenses is also cheaper. That is why not Chinese students, but foreign students from other countries do come to local universities a lot. And I think your second question was a very important one. And I, yes, strongly agree with your idea that that needs to be reflected upon my research. So one of the students from Bangladesh, he had a very strong sense of elitism. I think that was really translated into the perception that he or she has toward the Korean society, and especially compared to the student on the degree course, I think graduate school students had a strong sense of elitism. So they know that what they see from the labor market is only one of the aspects of the Korean society. So the experiences of the language school student and also graduate school students are different from one another. Third question that you raised, I think maybe you could have misunderstood over what I said. The person I said who dropped out, he dropped out not because he felt hurt from the discriminatory treatment. I think the students that I interviewed, they thought that not only studying but also working was very important to them. They wanted to work and they wanted to send money back home because the level of wage is quite different to their original country. So when they encountered difficulties in Korea, I think one of the addressing measures to them is to just drop out of school. So there are many cases where they chose to drop out. Of course, it is not that every foreign students to opt out that choice, but I think there are many students who are on the language course just dropped out of the course because after spending some time in Korea, there's a language student, they are not very good at Korean and they do not have human networks. And in that situation, when they encounter difficulties, they readily drop out the course. So it is highly likely that will happen to language students because they do not have anything to depend on to address the issues encountered. So statistically, those who are on the language course, again, it is likely that they end up as illegal migrant workers.
Thank you very much. If we have enough time, I think it'll be really good if we can ask for a additional answer to this. But we will give you a time to ask to Professor Ina Young. Thank you very much, Professor Kim. I think you solved much of my question and my curiosity. And since 2000, Professor Lee, the changes and the direction of the changes in the feminism movement, by listening to your lecture and presentation, I learned a lot. And especially recently, I give lecture and about 3 to 4 years in the past, we have gender conflicts intensified, and many people, more and more people, try to talk about this. But in some cases, it's not only negative; it's also can be a situation that we can make a really positive development in the future. The feminism is to go against the dominant male society and also to enhance empowerment of women. That is also the gist of the movement of the feminism. And I think this is the right way to go and really positive. But when it is going too much in the extreme, in the spectrum, the word feminism itself, it has the connotation as a really negative one. So when I was really working in the society and feminism, it is not something that we will accept as negatively or positively, but we have a negative connotation to feminism already. I don't know why that kind of connotation first started, and that was really curious for me. Why do we have that negative connotations? And the online communities, they only have extreme opinions or dialogues. Then in the digital native and other mainstream trends and phenomenon that we have in 21st century, I think, do you think there's some connection between the two? Thank you very much for the question. I believe while teaching students and studying about this, I know that you will have many difficulties. I didn't write it here, but there's an online community called Every Time. There's a witch hunting against feminists. And during the classes, the discourse or arguments they had during the class, when they have different opinion, they just try to attack those who have different opinion, and that online attack is transferred into the direct attack offline. That's why those male professors, your help and your support is necessary, because many female feminists, they had to go to hospital because of the random attack against them just because they were feminists. Whether it be negative or positive, the connotations about feminism that make the mental health of female degrade degrade aggravated and degraded a lot these days. It is far different from the movement in the Western culture, because in the Western culture, back in 18th century, they first started their feminism movement by theory, and they had internal capability that built up over time internally within the feminism, but socially they had built and developed it as a social trend and movement that slowly and naturally came into being. They have their own citizens' perception, not to directly quote it or cite it, but to just talk about it naturally. But things are different in our country, and nobody knows what feminism is. And even if in even in the case of mine, when I said I'm majoring in feminism, they said, yes, feminism is really good about 10 years ago, because they believe feminism is to make female like female. That is just ignorance, because they don't know about it. They didn't even think about what feminism is, and they didn't even think about the movement itself yet. And as you pointed out, the digital culture in Korea, that online uh, reply related culture that we have in online community, that was a starting point about the backlash and the movement against feminism, especially in the online community dominated by males. That was huge. Not only the anti-discrimination law and hate uh, or hate speech or hate crime, online and offline, which was mentioned in our keynote session. We don't have any barriers or any policies to go against it. That was really disadvantage or big gap the current administration has. That is a huge failure. This is a specific group to keep their ideology, to justify their belief. They try to victimize other group. We also have history back in 90s in Western culture. They have in the neoliberalism in the start of it, the sexual minorities or female minorities, they were victimized. Based on that, we had the Susan's book backlash. We don't have exactly the same case, but here in Korea, early 2000, we started to have this phenomenon in earnest. That is the big characteristics that we have provided. When we go back to your first question, actually, feminism is not an ideology. It is a theory. It is a movement, and it is started by the way of perception. Who am I? And how I will be perceived by others. That is the gist of the feminism. The negative connotation about feminism has always been there. And those people who write feminism books, they said, I'm not a feminist. That was it in back in 19th centuries. And they tried to get the vote right. They tried to promote equality, but they were stigmatized as feminist. The feminism and feminists were stigmatized even more harshly than it is now. I believe the backlash starts when we try to achieve, we almost achieve equality. That means when time goes by, then we will have time, the backlash will step back. The history is not progressive that much, but we are going and we are moving step by step. Thank you very much.
Can I add more? Yes, listening to you, make me think that in our school, from the Gender Equality Committee, put up the poster on the wall and somebody didn't like it. I saw the poster was tearing apart. I think the way of expression, I think, started from just leaving negative comments in your reply and even up to tearing apart the paper that you don't like it. I think systematically, can we improve this? Well, basically, there should be various different systems and laws for anti-discrimination treatment. And the reason behind backlash and hatred speech comes from anxiety and concerns which have a specific target. I would say yes, uncertainty. That is a commonality found among young generation in Korea, because the young generation know that they cannot be as good as their parents. And even after COVID-19, they are very worried that they have to maintain their life in this way, utilizing that the concerns and worrisome. I think that also boils down to a problem of media and the political circle. So the way of expression, for example, the individual person tore that paper apart. I think we need to look into why the young person did that. Why that should be the expression of the feelings among young generation. I think the older generation should look into it, and also men should look into it.
As a moderator, the job that I need to do is keeping the time right. So we have 5 minutes left. I have two questions for each of the presenters. I hope I can give all the questions that I received, but due to the time interest, those something not that related to the topic of today's session, I will omit that and I will ask you the questions most relevant to your presentation. To Professor Kim. So the female students studying abroad to Korea and male student, did you find any differences between the gender difference? And another question was, because this was the pre-COVID-19 question, so I will omit that question. So please answer to the first question. Due to the interest of time, I will talk very shortly. What is obvious is the female workers, they do and serve in the restaurant. So that is not only for the foreign students, but also many female workers working in an unskilled job market. So they are, in most cases, targeted and victimized in the sexual harassment in many different ways in reality. But when they are exposed to such a situation, where to go and whom to talk to, and it is possible to talk about this. They don't know the system in Korea. They don't know how Korean society works in terms of counter reacting to the sexual harassment. So, in many ways, I really want to reveal that situation. If we have some time, I think I thought a little bit about the question from Professor Lee. So, Koreans and for Korea, Korea is kind of sandwiched between those Western countries and those poor countries, developing countries. So the whites, they are not only those that we are admiring, but also they are the vested right holders. So in my interview, it was not exposed well enough. But first, those studying abroad in Asian countries. So how Koreans are categorizing foreign students and how they are placed in that kind of categories. Not only I myself, but also other students coming from Western countries and countries in Asia, they themselves judge it and categorize themselves in the category. That is very interesting point that I can study further.
And my question is directed to Professor Lee. There's a generational gap and differences among young women, and there are examples where they're to give a discriminatory treatment to young women. And what will be the reason behind? Of course, this could be a difficult question. So you said yes, yes. Of course, a generational gap exists among women and also men at the same time. So the movement of the young women, I think, gives discrimination to older women. What would that be? Well, because of the movement by the young women, I think that the person who tried to ask that what if older generation, especially women in the older generation, is subject to discrimination. Well, there was a Me Too movement started to appear. Women in their 50s and 60s supported a lot, and they're just saying that you have to continuously flirt with the person you like, then the person would end up marrying you. And there were many cases where, oh, that is my case, and now based on the modern term, that is like a sexual assault. Well, I really can't understand the question. What kind of discriminatory the experience and treatment is there among older generation, among women? I think what we enjoy is attributable to the people before us. So many things that we enjoy is thanks to sacrifice of the people before us. That is something that we do not understand. So I think there's just something that is misunderstood among young women. Thanks to what's been proposed or what's been insisted by older generation, we can enjoy what we enjoy. For example, finding a job in our labor market, thanks to the insistence, I think we could look into the problems that we are facing. Thank you so much. Due to time constraint, I think we better wrap up. After attending 2 presentations, I think we could understand potential issues related to cultural diversity. So this wraps up the first session of the international conference. Thank you.